Yes. Now I hope that the sound and the image is very clear to you. Can you listen me? Yes. Please provide me feedback. Thank you very much. So let's begin. Yesterday we studied select passages for comprehension. Today we are going to study the select definitions of language, features of language, functions of the language, and the few terms associated, important terms associated with the language, and finally evaluation pattern. So without wasting the time, let us initiate this presentation. See definitions of language. Language is a purely human and non-instinctive method of communicating various ideas, thoughts, emotions, and desires by means of system of voluntarily produced symbols is the definition of language given by the famous linguist Edward Sapir. So in all, the very first beginning makes it clear the language is purely human, means this is the characteristic feature of human beings only. There are certain restrictions in animal communication. So Aristotle also says that language is the best medium of communication to interact among human beings. Let us turn towards the second definition. Language is a natural object, a component of the human mind physically represented in the brain and part of the biological endowment of the species. This definition is given by Chomsky, the famous linguist. So, let us turn towards the third definition, Encyclopedia Britannica. Language, a system of conventional, spoken, manual, or written symbols by means of which human beings, as members of a social group and participants in its culture, express themselves. So, language is a system of symbols. Language is conventional. Language is culturally inherited. Written symbols, the spoken symbols, and the people interact among themselves in a group, in the society. They express their feelings, their ideas, their emotions. So in all, after studying these three sample definitions of the language, our concept is very clear. It should be very clear. Let us turn towards the next slide, which informs us about the characteristic features of language. The first feature of language, that language is a means of communication. Language is a means of self-expression. So here you can see a person is speaking, delivering a lecture. He is known as source. The denser medium of air carries the message. It is called channel. And the message is received by listeners, and the receivers nod their heads and they provide feedback to the speaker, to the source. In this way, this process of communication, this cycle of communication becomes complete. So this is the first feature of language, that language is the best means of communication and the expression of our ideas, thoughts, emotions, and desires. Advanced Sapir. The second feature of language is a displacement. So it is the displacement of time, place, and action. You can see here, language can be used to refer to things which are present or not present, real or imagined, matter in the past, present, or future. We can talk about past as well future, seating in the present. So this is a displacement. It is the displacement of time. Or in faraway places, this property provides speakers with an opportunity to talk about a wide range of things, free from barriers caused by separation in time and place. So this is displacement of time that is discussed here in the second characteristic feature of the language. Let us turn towards the next slide in this series. The next feature of the language is arbitrariness. So what is arbitrariness? This feature was first proposed by Ferdinand de Saussure This means that there is no logical connection between meaning and sound of morpheme. Different sounds are used to refer to the same object in different languages. For example, I am showing you a tree. It is called a tree in English. The same object is called ped in Hindi, jhad in Marathi, vraksh in Sanskrit. So the object is the same, but the symbols attached to the object are different. So this is arbitrariness of the language. This is important feature of language. The next feature is a duality of structure, sound and meaning. We observe double structure in the language. The system of sound that we studied in the very first lecture, which is called phonology, systematic and scientific study of the sound pattern in English. And second, construction of the sentences. This is meaning of the sentences. There is double structure. So see what is written here. Duality. Language possesses the property of having two levels of structure. The first structure is the structure of sounds. This is basic structure. The second is a meaning, that is higher level structure. Sounds are combined with one another to form the meaningful units such as words. The second unit sounds are meaningless and the primary units have distinct and identifiable meaning. So we observe double structure in the language. Word structure, sentence structure, sound structure, meaning structure. The structures are double in the language. Next feature of the language is verbal symbolism. So this is a system of spoken and written words where we use sounds and symbols to communicate. Verbal language consists of 5 important features, as it is denoted here. That language is system, language comprises symbols. Okay, so verbal symbolism. The symbols are the sounds used in the language. As I told you in the very first lecture, there are 44 sounds in English language and 26 alphabets. And with the help of these 44 sounds, we are able to converse with each other in English in a better way. So these are the symbols. These are the verbal symbols, spoken symbols, which are used in language. This is the important characteristic feature of language. The next feature of language is that language is a social phenomenon. So this is the feature. This is the thing that we use in society. In social group which involves at least 2 people, the speaker and the hearer, the listener, language is a special characteristics of humans, and it can also be regarded as human criteria because only human beings are able to speak. The complicated emotions and desires through the language. They communicate in a better way in comparison to animal communication. So language is meant for social interaction, social phenomenon, is an important characteristic feature of language. Let us turn towards the next slide in the series. Language is a conventional human entity. So this is by convention that we inherit language from our forefathers. It is a convention that is used in the society. So we inherit language from the elders by convention, and this convention is hierarchical. The next feature of the language is creative, extendable and modifiable. So see the slide. Language is a unique phenomenon in the world. It has its own creativity and productivity. Despite their common features of the language universals, each language has its peculiarities and distinctive feature. So language is creative. I can create so many different structures in the language. For example, I play cricket. I play cricket with my friend. I play cricket on the ground with my friend. So language is creative. Language is extendable. Language is modifiable. We can change it. We can change the structure as per our need. So this is important feature of the language. Let us turn towards the next slide in the series. Structurally complex. So language, we can observe complex structures in language. See, subject, verb, and object that I have denoted here in this slide. In English, we use the subject first, then verb, then object. In words, subject, then verb, then object. Then in the condition is the same, means different in different languages. In Welsh language, first verb is used and then subject and then object. So language is complex in its structure. We can form so many complex structures while using the sentence. The next feature of language is that language is culturally transmitted. So no doubt, up to some extent, language is a genetically also means in through behavior, it is transmitted from one generation to another generation. More than that, it is transmitted culturally. So animals call system genetical transmission system, but the language is culturally transmitted. It is passed on from one generation to the next generation by teaching and learning rather than by instinct. And so is the reasons the students, they go to the school to learn certain things, to learn the grammar of language, to learn the basic tenets of the language in the schools and colleges. It clearly indicates that language is culturally transmitted. These are the select features of language. But apart from that, let us study the 4 important skills in the language. The first skill is listening. There are 2 types of listening. Okay, there is a difference between listening and hearing. We hear. Listening is a very careful and conscious activity. So, active listening skill comprises ask open-ended questions, request for clarification, justification. We should be attentive while listening. We can summarize. We can paraphrase with the help of listening skill. We can reflect our feelings. So we can ask probing questions. So these are the things that we can deal in a listening skill. Hearing is somewhat different. Here is very casual process. It does sound means just come casually to my ear. I listen, I hear it. But when the teacher teaches a lesson inside the classroom, the student pays full attention with the full concentration. He listens the lesson and not hears. So listening is very important skill. If you listen foreign English very carefully, the next step that we are able to speak English in a correct way. So the next level is speaking, spoken skill. The 4 different spoken skills have been highlighted, focus here in this slide. The first is fluency. If we use a spoken skill continuously, we can develop fluency in the language. We have to enrich our vocabulary first for that. We have to study grammar in that particular language. We have to understand and learn the correct pronunciation of the words in that language. And after that only, we can develop fluency in speaking language. I humbly want to state one thing here, that no one is claim perfection. No one is master and champion. But our effort should be in the direction of perfection, surely, to make the language more perfect and meaningful in its use through speaking. The next skill is a reading skill. So what are the essential components of reading? It is mentioned. Why do we read? We read for comprehension, as I told you yesterday in my previous lecture. We should develop fluency in the language while reading the text. Our vocabulary should be enriched. We should be very strong in our vocabulary. Phonetic awareness should be there, that we should know the sounds and the pronunciation of the particular words in that language and the phonics. These are the important things when we read. There are 4 types of reading, as it is mentioned here in this slide. The first is skimming. Skimming is for general purpose, remember. Skimming is done to know the gist of the passage, summary of the passage, to grasp the main idea given in the passage. Skimming is used. So, apart from that, scanning is a different skill in reading. Scanning is done to focus on particular information. So when I read rapidly, I understand the passage in general. This is skimming. But when I can tell the name of the characters given in this passage, this is a scanning. Means to focus on particular information. Apart from this, there is intensive reading and extensive reading. जे वरवर आपण रीडिंग करतो ते एक्सटेन्सिव्ह रिडिंग, जे आपण सखोल वाचन करतो, काळजीपूर्वक करतो ते इंटेन्सिव्ह रिडिंग. असे 4 प्रकार आपण रिडिंगचे या ठिकाणी स्टडी केले. पुढे जाऊया. वन मोर इम्पॉर्टंट स्किल इज रायटिंग. So what are the main things in the writing? When we listen language carefully, when we develop the ability to use the language with the help of English phonology, after that we can read it with proper accent and intonation. The next 4th skill is to develop the writing ability in English in the graphic form. So what we have to do? Sometimes we are asked to write a speech. We write essay in the schools and colleges. We write different paragraphs. We email something to our friends while writing the message. The same is in WhatsApp also. We write the formal letters, job applications, report writing is there. We write notices for the understanding of the student, different notices, and advertisements also. So for this purpose, these are the important components of writing. We have to develop the skill of writing English language in a better way. For that, we have to study, we have to learn the spellings. We should know the correct tense while writing the language. We should have the ability to use the language cohesively and to organize and arrange the points in a sequence. So this is the 4th important skill in the language. Apart from this, I want to mention the 5th skill here in the language, and that is constructivism. Constructivism is the recent approach in language, and the great exponent of this constructivism is the Swiss linguist Jean Piaget. This is Jean Piaget's theory, constructivism. याला आपण मराठीमध्ये ज्ञान संरचनावाद असं म्हणूया. विद्यार्थी हे स्वतः ज्ञानाचे रचयिते असतात. शिक्षक फक्त एक फॅसिलिटेटर म्हणून फक्त टीचरचा रोल जो असतो तो रिस्ट्रिक्टेड असतो. शिक्षक फक्त काउन्सिलिंग करतात, मदत करतात, हेल्प करतात विद्यार्थ्यांना. विद्यार्थी स्वतःचं ज्ञान जे असतात ते प्रिव्हियस नॉलेजच्या मदतीने कन्स्ट्रक्ट करत असतात, असं जीन पियाजेने या थेअरीमध्ये सांगितलेलं आहे, कन्स्ट्रक्टिव्हिजम मध्ये. So from that point of view, nowadays in NET and SET examination, this point has been focused, highlighted. We should know this. What is constructivism? Constructivism is the simple theory. The learners, the students, they construct their knowledge with the help of previous experience, with the help of books, with the help of the counseling and the guidance by the teachers. So let us read what is given here in this slide. Constructivism is basically a theory based on the observation and scientific study about how people learn. It says that people construct their own understanding and knowledge of the world through experiencing things and reflecting on those experiences. When we encounter something new, we have to reconcile it and with our previous ideas and experience, maybe changing what we believe or maybe discarding the new information as irrelevant. In any case, we are active creators of our own knowledge. To do this, we must ask question, explore, and access what we know. So this is constructivism. This is the recent approach in language. We should know this. Let us turn towards the next slide. Again, we are going to study the two important things here: synchronic linguistics and diachronic linguistics. Ferdinand de Saussure distinguishes between synchronic, that means a static linguistic, and diachronic means evolutionary linguistics. This has been also means asked so many times during examination. So what is synchronic linguistics? It is the study of language at a particular point in the time. For example, the ancient time. If I'm studying the medieval time or the recent modern, postmodern time, this is a synchronic study. What is diachronic study? What is diachronic linguistics? This is the study of the history or evolution of the languages. So diachronic linguistics or the diachronic study passes from various ages. There is not time restriction to diachronic study. Some historical point of view is there in diachronic study, which is not in synchronic linguistics. Synchronic linguistics is a time-bound activity that we can say. See here, in the slide it is mentioned. Synchronic linguistics confines to the study of how language is spoken by a specified speech community at a particular point of time. And what is diachronic linguistics? Diachronic linguistics is the kind in which we study the historical development of language through different periods of time. Let us turn towards the 7 important functions of the language given by Michael Halliday. The first function of language, regulated. Yes, sir. So let's begin the presentation. Let's begin the presentation. I'm sharing my screen with you. Sorry for the interruption. So I mentioned you regulatory functions means to regulate or the control the actions of someone, to ask someone to do something. Regulatory language controls the listener's behavior. We can ask or persuade or request or command someone to do something. This is to regulate the activities of the listener. This is important function of language. What is next is interactional function. The interactional function of the language is the language used to develop social relationship and is the process of interaction. So in this function of the language, this is considered that language is meant for interaction among human beings. This is for communication. So we speak with each other to share our feelings, ideas, emotion, desires, sorrows, sufferings, happiness. We interact. So this is important feature of the language. The next is representational function. Language is used to convey fact and information. This is representation. We collect so many facts. When we listen the news on television or we read the newspaper, we get fact and information through various forms of media. Representational function of the language. Next function is personal function. Personal function means express our personal opinions, our identity, our feelings, desires, emotions, happiness, sadness, and the innate feeling in the heart. This is personal function of the language. As William Wordsworth says in one of the poems, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dance with his daffodils. So the poem Daffodils, composed by William Wordsworth, is nothing but the example of a personal function of the language. The next function is imaginative function. So here we use imagination. When we tell some stories, fictions, to the students, to the children's, with the help of imagination, we construct something, we tell them something. So imaginative function is very important function of the language. The next is instrumental function. So what is instrumental function? Language is useful to fulfill a need and to gain service such as food, drink, comfort. So this function of the language is the language has been used to fulfill our needs and to gain something. This is instrumental function. The next is heuristic function. Language is used to learn and explore. When the teacher teaches inside the classroom to the students learn. They try to explore new ideas with the help of the probing questions. They surf on internet and gain information. This is a very important function of language. Usually the students get information, knowledge through asking questions. So the next point is the difference between content and method. So what is content? Content simply means the totality of what is to be taught inside the school or college system. Okay, what we have to teach to the student is a content. The content component of teaching learning situation refers to the important fact, principles, and concept to be taught. Method is how to teach. What to teach is a content. How to teach is a method. So there are so many methods of teaching the language to the students. Let us read. A method is a target plan or set of orderly procedures that are based on a credible approach. It reveals what needs to be done in a systematic way and how to focus on achieving those goals. In method, technique is a precise strategy, concrete tricks to help to reach the goals. So, method is a way through which the objectives can be got. Okay, so this point is very important in the NET and SET exams. Many times such questions are asked. What is the difference between content and method? We should know this. So let us turn to the methods of language teaching. Here are the select methods of language teaching I have mentioned in this slide. The first is a direct method, means use the target language directly for the interaction with the students. The second is a grammar translation method, means to translate the certain things to the students in their mother tongue so that the content should be more accessible, easy to them, and to teach certain principles of the grammar to the students. The next is total physical response. After that, there is a communicative language teaching, which is in brief known as a CLT. The silent way. In silent way of teaching, the teacher becomes silent and the students become more active. The next method of teaching is a community language learning, means in the group, in the society, in the community, we learn language by means of imitation. The next one is immersion. Immersion means to completely absorb in it. To take means to learn language from various sources is immersion. Then task-based language learning, to offer students some task to accomplish something, that is task-based activity. The next is a natural approach, means we have to study the students' inclination and to teach them accordingly, according to their natural inclination. This is natural approach method of teaching the language. And the next is lexical syllabus. In lexical syllabus, we have to enrich our vocabulary. We have to study so many different words. If our vocabulary is strong enough, then we can use the language in a better way, effectively. We can interact with among our friends. So these are the select methods of language teaching. Let us study it one by one. The first, direct method. The direct method is called natural method, and it is often used in teaching foreign language. Refrain from using the learner's native language and uses only the target language. So there is no other language has been used, no second language. Only one language has been used here. If we are teaching English to the students, we will speak English directly with the students and will receive feedback from the students in English alone. This is a direct method of teaching. The second method is a grammar translation method. Grammar translation method, GTM, is a method of learning any foreign language by the practice of translating or converting the sentence of the native language. Grammar is studied with the help of mother tongue. So the students feel comfortable with their mother tongue sometimes. So the teacher uses grammar translation method for the students who live in mofussil areas, especially in rural areas, so that the content should appear more easy to them. Grammar translation method has been used. The next method is audio-lingual method. So here in this method, it is the method of foreign language teaching which emphasizes the teaching of listening and speaking before reading and writing. So the focus here in this method is to listen and to speak the language in a correct way more than reading and writing. It uses dialogue as the main form of language presentation. So dialogue, that means speaking, is given importance here in this method. The next method of teaching the language is a total physical response. It is a method of teaching language or vocabulary concept by using physical movement to react to verbal input. That means a physical embodiment, body language is very much significant while learning and teaching the language. This is what we say stimulus response theory in another words. So our physical response while learning is very much important. so that the teacher gets the feedback from the students directly through the physical response from the students. So the next method of language teaching is a CLT, that means communicative language teaching. It is also referred to as the communicative approach, which entails teaching language through communication. Okay, so communication is given importance rather than grammatical rules and all that. Communication, the ideas, thoughts, emotions, and desires to another is very important, and the structure has been neglected here in this approach. The next method of teaching the language is the silent way. The teacher remains silent throughout the teaching. He offers the activity task to the students and asks them to speak, interact, and to probe the questions. The teacher's role becomes silent. In this teaching method, students are engaged in the learning process, discovering words and sounds instead of having these drilled into them. The teacher remains silent during the process, making the students active. The students become active and the teachers become passive here in the silent way method of language teaching. So let us turn towards the next method, community language learning, CLL. Community language learning is a language teaching approach focused on group interest learning. So in this, we have to see what is the students are interested in what exactly. It is based on the counseling approach in which the teacher acts as a counselor or a paraphraser, while the learner is seen as a collaborator in community language learning. So the language is focused on the interest of the learner. The next method is immersion. So what is it? It is the most natural way to learn a language. Learning by immersion means that the children are immersed in a language bath. They hear, they speak, they learn language. Whatever they do with the help of language, they absorb and engross completely in that. This is immersion. So the next method of language teaching is a task-based language learning. Task-based language learning, that means TBLT. This is also called known as task-based instruction. That means a TBI focuses on the use of language to complete a meaningful task in the target language. Such tasks can include visiting a doctor, conducting an interview, or calling customer service for the help. So a situation is given to the students, a task is given to the students, and the language has been developed through this. The next method is a natural approach. Teaching according to the natural approach focuses on communicative abilities of the students. This approach is based on observation and interpretation of how learners acquire both first and second language. So we have to see the inclination, natural tendency of the students to learn, to acquire language, and in that way we have to supply material to him for the interaction, for the language learning. The next select method of language teaching is the lexical syllabus. Lexical syllabus is based on vocabulary and lexical units. So in that, what we have to do, we have to enrich our vocabulary. We have to learn so many different words, as the glossary is given there just below the lesson, so that the understanding of the student should become cement and concrete. Lexical syllabus is important method of language teaching. So here, my dear friends, I have tried to mention select methods of teaching the language. I hope that your concept is very clear here. Let us turn towards the next slide, mentioning the difference between language acquisition and language learning. So acquisition is a natural process and learning is a conscious activity, remember. Whatever we observe in the society, we acquire it through the behavior, through imitation. And we visit schools and colleges for learning certain things at the conscious level. So this is the main difference. See, acquisition is a gradual development. It happens naturally, it happens through interaction with the ones who are native speakers. It focuses on meaningful communication, not on, and it is the focus is not on grammatical form. In learning is a conscious process, remember. Grammar, vocabulary, rules are learned in controlled manner. So learning activity means we have to learn certain principles, grammar, certain canons of the language in it. It happens in schools and colleges and so on. Activities and methods are designed, and the main focus is on grammar. Let us turn towards the next slide in the series. Stages of the language acquisition. So, what are the certain stages a student, a infant acquires the language? The first is babbling stage, in which he babbles, he pronounces in certain what we say sounds. Learning the sound system of the language is babbling. During this stage, an infant starts experimenting with different sounds. He uttered the words kaka, baba, mama, like this. This is babbling, remember. And in this way, the student imitates someone and he acquires the language. The second important thing is a holophrastic stage, learning the syntax and semantics of the language. So in this, children have developed enough language skill to say single words during this stage. The words are usually simple and refer to everyday objects and help the children to identify their basic needs. So this is the next development when the students use the single words in different situation to fulfill and to complete their demands inside the houses or in the schools. This is holophrastic stage. The next step is the two-word stage. The two-word stage typically occurs at the age of 18 to 24 months and consists of toddlers using two-word phrases in their speech. So they now after holophrastic stage, the students, the childrens develop the ability to use two words at a time and they interact. So these are the certain stages by which a child acquires the language. The next is the theories of language acquisition. Two important theories are there for acquiring the language. The first is mentalism, means the mentality of the learner. Mentalists believe that man is born with innate capacity. He has inborn capacity for acquisition of the language. The learner possesses an inborn capacity which permits them to learn, to acquire the language as a normal maturational process. So most of the things that depend on the mentality of the learner to acquire the language. The second important thing, empirical approach, that means a behavioral approach. John Skinner in 1985 has mentioned this in his theory. He equated learning a language to verbal behavior. Therefore, he believes that language acquisition is like any other behavior, can be observed. Language can be learned in a better way by observing others. Observe, imitate them, and learn different languages. So these two theories of language acquisition are important in linguistics. Let us turn towards the next slide in the series. The factors influencing the language acquisition. So what are the factors that influence acquiring the language? The first, receptive language before expressive language. The child need to be able to understand spoken language first before he understand the speaking of the language. Okay, he should understand the certain words, certain symbols, certain sounds in the language before to use the language on practical basis. This is the first thing. Second is environmental influence on language acquisition. So the influences of the family structure, language use at home, and literary environment influence on language acquisition. So the environment inside the house, if the parents are cultured, sophisticated, if they are educated, the students learn the language rapidly because they teach some principles of the language to the students, to the children inside the home. So this environment, exposure for language acquisition is very important. The students learn certain structure of the language at home. So home is the first school for the students. They acquire language by imitating their parents, elder brother or sister. The environment influence on them. The next factor is biological influence on language acquisition. So let us read this. Noam Chomsky suggests that a basic template for all human languages is embedded in our genes. If a child is not surrounded by people who are using the language, the child will gradually lose the ability to acquire the language naturally without effort. To make this point very clear to you, let me cite you an example. If a students learn or acquire the language here, the dialect or the language that is taught to him, and if we keep the students to learn the language in England, he will get exposure there and he will learn the language in a better way in comparison to the students or the children who will live here in India. So biological influence on language acquisition is very important. So these are the certain factors that influence language acquisition. Let it turn towards the next slide. We are at the end of this lecture right now. So types of evolution. When the students acquire language, they learn language in control situation. There are types of evolution. The students have been evaluated through the various examination. So the most important evaluation is formative evaluation and summative evaluation. Formative evaluation is a continuous process. The teacher assesses the students in various forms and they provide feedback to the students and the students improve their errors. This is formative evaluation, a continuous process of evaluation. So formative assessment considers evaluation as a process. Formative assessment are used to assess learners' needs and progress during a course, including feedback. So feedback is very essential. The teachers provide feedback to the students correct themselves. They learn so many new things and then they proceed further to make the language more accurate and precise. Exactly. So formative evaluation plays very vital role while assessing the student and to improve his language. Summative evaluation is generally done at the end of the year. And here, the possibility of feedback is not possible. There is no feedback in summative evaluation. Direct result is there. The goal of the summative assessment is to evaluate the students' learning at the end of an instructional unit by comparing it against some standards or some benchmark, some grade, some percent or marks. CGPA is offered to the students at the end of the examination while doing the summative evaluation. It is generally done at the end of the year. And there is no possibility of providing feedback to the students. So this evaluation, summative evaluation is somewhat rigid in its nature and formative evaluation is flexible in its nature. So these are two types of evaluation are very important to assess the performance of the student. Let us turn towards the next slide. So the question arises in the mind that what is the difference between error and mistake? When we evaluate the student, certain slight difference is there. Try to make the concept very clear. What is mistake? People make mistake when they already have the knowledge, when they know certain things, but still they commit it, but still they behave in a wrong way. This is mistake. Having full knowledge, they commit mistake, but a lack of concern and attention. They don't pay any attention. They don't have the concern. They have full knowledge of the same thing, but they behave in a wrong way. That is called mistake. Mistakes are accidental. Mistakes can be self-corrected. So this is mistake. I hope that your notion is very clear now regarding this. What is error? The next point. Error is more formal. when people have errors, it is because lack of proper knowledge. People don't have knowledge at all when they commit error. Means they don't know it. The term error is more suitable for to use it in formal context. Let us turn. I hope that the difference between mistake and error is very clear to you. Mistakes can be self-corrected, error cannot. So, to study the language, certain commissions are there in India. Such commissions are also asked in the competitive examination like NEET and SET. Let us study this and let us conclude today's lecture. So the first commission, important commission, when India received freedom in 1947, a commission for higher education in India to learn the language was formed. It was in 1948. And the commission was a Radhakrishnan Commission. Remember this. This is very important information for the sake of exam. The second commission was appointed in 1952, Mudliar Commission, to study language and for the study of higher education here in India. The next important commission was appointed in 1964 and function was published in its report in 1966. The commission was a D.S. Kothari Commission. The next commission after that was formed in 1986. National Policy on Education was formed. It was in 1986. This was also one of the important commissions for higher education in India. In 2005, there was Knowledge Commission. I hope that Sam Pitroda was the head of that Knowledge Commission of India. It was formed associated in 2005. The next commission, which is recently been formed and wrote and published by the former head of Indian Space Research Organization ISRO K. Kasturi Rangan, entitled as National Educational Policy. And nowadays in the schools and colleges and in the universities and across the whole nation, the people are deliberating on this NEP, New Education Policy, which we have to implement from the June 2023 onwards. So my dear friends, I hope that these select commissions are very important for the sake of examination. Try to recite it, try to remember it. So let us finish our presentation today. I hope that this is the time to stop now. In my next lecture after 2 days on Monday in the evening at 5 o'clock, I will inform you the mode and means of communication in the lecture, and we will complete the module language. My sincere wishes are with you. Study hard. Thank you very much for being with me always very positively. Have a nice time. Thank you very much.